Ladies and gentlemen, today I've got something very special for you that I hope you will appreciate as much as I do as a chess fan. I used to make many videos like this in 2020, 2021, the early days of the chess boom, and since then I kind of got away from it because truly the historical chess deep dives just don't do as great, for whatever reason. But hopefully this one does, and let me know in the comments if you want more content like this. Today the spotlight is on perhaps the greatest genius to ever play the game of chess. And of course I am talking about the magician of Riga, Latvia, Mikhail Tal. Mikhail Tal was born in 1936 in, as I just mentioned, Riga. And he was one of the most influential chess players of the entire 20th century. He won the world championship against the perennial best player at the time, Mikhail Binck, and Tal was an absolutely fascinating individual. He lived a bohemian lifestyle. He drank, he smoked, he drank and smoked at the board. If you're watching this and you're a little bit young, he drank lots of juice and sometimes water. He was an absolutely fascinating individual, and his chess was like a breath of fresh air. He sacrificed pieces constantly. He attacked and struck fear into the heart of so many of his opponents. And yet, at first, nobody took him seriously. They thought that he was just a trickster, that he played like a scammy type of chess. And yet, he was one of the only players to have a positive score against players like Bobby Fischer. Okay? I'm going to show you 4 games from his illustrious chess career, the last of which he played 1 month before he tragically died in 1992. He came out of a hospital, played against Garry Kasparov, arguably the greatest chess player of all time, and he managed to win. Now, Mikhail Tal said something. He said there are correct sacrifices. There's 2 types of sacrifices in chess. Correct ones and my own. And he also said, in chess, you have to take your opponent into a deep, dark forest where 2 + 2 is 5, and the way out is only wide enough for 1. You know, I kind of like to play chess like that. You know, I'm not a huge fan of playing chess in a boring way. Let me show you this incredible game that he played against the Grandmaster Hans Joachim Hecht. This was at the time he was not yet a Grandmaster. I think he was awarded it a little bit later, but he's still very much alive. I mean, a lot of the chess players from the 20th century have passed away, Mikhail Tal being one of them, from excessive, likely, smoking and drinking, which he did at the chessboard. But my goodness, I mean, what a player he was. So this one begins as a standard 2 knights queen's pawn. Black plays bishop to b4, pinning white's knight. And this game is played in 1962. So theory of the Queen's Indian and all these openings is not yet fully developed. Tal plays a very principled way, developing all of his pieces. Hecht plays h6, trying to get rid of that bishop pin. And then he takes and plays d6. Very principled stuff. Gives up his dark squared bishop. White no longer has the opportunity to play e4, and now black is going to take a dark squared approach to the game, maybe play e5 a little bit later because he doesn't have that bishop that he traded. And there we go. Now we notice that Tal breaks certain principles. He moves his knight backwards, moving it a second time in the opening, but it's because he wants the center. That's what he wants. Tal doesn't calculate. He just plays on instinct. He plays on feel. There's a legend to Tal. One thing I didn't even mention in the introduction, Tal was born with a congenital deformity. He was born with 3 fingers on his right hand. And yet, despite that hardship, that would stop many, many people from doing many things, he was a talented pianist. He could play the piano extremely well while drinking, while smoking, while being a world chess champion, despite that hardship. It's just like his whole legend is just fascinating, just absolutely incredible. Well, here we go. Here we go. Tal takes the center. He's going to develop his bishop next. There he goes. You'll notice that Hecht is playing a very principled game. So many pawns on the dark square, a very maneuvering type of game. A lot of players like to slow down the burning fire. You know, they try to play positionally. Tal wasn't going to have any of that. He's not going to get into a long-term maneuvering game. In this game, he blows open the queen side with the move c5. All right? c5. The idea that when black captures the pawn, which, by the way, he cannot take this, because that would open up the b file, and that would really soften up the queen side. And so dc5 was played, and Tal did this. He said, all right, I opened up the queen side. I got snipers at the king. I'm going to give a check, force black to block somehow. And the best way oftentimes to defend against Tal was actually in a confrontational manner, but players would play very passively. They would play very, very passively, getting into these kind of like close battles against him because they just feared his power so much, like a powerful boxer. Queen back to e6. And Tal never stopped. And here he played this move e5. You'll notice he has completely left his bishop to die. It's because he's ready with a counterpunch right away. He's ready with this move e5 right off the bat. He plays e5, and black strikes back with b5. A very, very principled decision, trying to get the queen out of the way, and then he's going to deal with the rest of the stuff. Maybe he'll grab the bishop, he's going to castle. No. This is the kind of player that Tal was. Tal loved to sacrifice, and he just had an instinct. He had a bloodlust for creating this havoc, this controlled chaos on the board. And in this position, with a queen hanging, with a knight hanging, with a bishop hanging, Mikhail Tal sacrificed all of them and captured this knight on f6, left all of his pieces out to die. You can't grab all three at once. All right? You just can't do it. It's not a free-for-all. All right? It's not a free-for-all. If you try to take the queen, you best be sure to hang on. You can't take anything else. You're not going to castle because the queen is still going to be hanging. So, he took. Now, Tal was able to get away with a move like this because his pieces are well-oiled and coordinated to target his opponent right after the queen is captured. So, Tal plays on instinct. He is like an avalanche. He is like a train whose brakes have broken. He captures on g7, simultaneously threatening to get a rook, but also reopening the diagonal for the bishop. All his pieces work together. Rook g8, and now the culmination of the sacrifice. It is actually not rook to e1, which looks like it wins a queen because it loses a bishop and a rook in the process, and when the dust settles, Tal would be a full rook down. He could grab the bishop on his way out, but then he would lose this. This is under fire, and he loses the endgame. No. Tal did one of two things. Tal either completely took his opponent's soul, or he would lead them into a deep, dark forest, and the road out of it would only be wide enough for one, and it would be for him. And the dust would settle, and he would be winning in an endgame. Bishop to f5! Sacrificing another piece, and another piece. All three pieces are hanging, and yet they all work beautifully, because you gotta choose who you're going for. If you take the bishop, I get knight to d6, and I win the queen, and I emerge in a better endgame. That very well could be the best move. You can take on h4, right? Now you'll notice Stockfish is kind of like demystifying the white attack. But when you played against Tal, you had to defend perfectly. He took the bishop, bishop e6, and then he tried to go for this. Tal just bulldozes in with more pieces. King e7, and beautifully gets out of danger, saving his rook, defending the bishop, and black still could maybe hang on. And he goes g3, grabs this, bishop takes a6. But like I said, when the dust settled, Tal was left in a game where he was down a pawn, but black had 1, 2, 3, 4 islands, doubled and completely shattered pawn structure, and white was better. White is better in an endgame despite being a full pawn down. All of this made possible by the fact that when his queen was attacked, he played pawn to f6, shredding open the center of the board, forcing his opponent to dance at his pace, escapes into the endgame, and he converts it expertly. The beautiful thing about Tal was he wasn't just an attacker. He had control of the game in every phase, and black ultimately succumbs to the pressure. You know, there is not much to be done. We go to an endgame, rook a6, rook f6. Look at all of black's pieces falling. At the end of the day, Tal was trained in the pioneer school of chess under the tutelage of Koblenz, and I will actually show you a game a little bit later, which he played against his trainer, but every strong Grandmaster of that generation was just bulletproof at endgames, and this one is no different. An incredible sequence of moves where he took down the German Grandmaster in an incredible flurry. And remember, I am ending the video of the game that he played a month before his death and beating Garry Kasparov, which is just otherworldly. Just otherworldly contribution to the legend. Here is a game that he played against his trainer, Koblenz. And let me just verify, actually, that Koblenz did get the Grandmaster title. Because there are players... I'm not actually sure he did. He might have been an international master. Chess title. Yeah, Grandmaster titles were like instituted in the mid-20th century. So officially, he might have not even been a Grandmaster. You know what? I'm going to leave it because out of respect for all his accomplishments, I will leave it. It might not be accurate, but I don't want to demote him to my title because me and Koblenz do not deserve the same title. I'm an international master. As far as I'm concerned, he was a Grandmaster of the game. This was a game played in 1957. It's one of the most unbelievable games I've ever seen in my life. It is a Rouser Variation Sicilian, and the motto of this game is, when you play Tal, do not play the Sicilian defense. Just don't do it. Now, there actually is a variation of the Caro-Kann defense named after Tal, because he loved its aggressive stuff. It's literally called the Tal Variation. So if you play the advanced Caro-Kann, bishop f5, h4, you're playing the Tal Variation. Now, this one was a Rouser Variation. Tal did not need a second invitation. He got his king castled queenside as fast as possible, looking to create an attack. Castles by black, knight to b3, queen b6, and there he went. Against his sensei, against his trainer, rook to d8, and now Tal was like, look, man, chess is a simple game. Let me get my bishop back to hit the queen. Black is going to get to play b5, but I don't care, because here we go. This is everything you wanted when you saw Tal playing a chess game. I mean, it was like a heavyweight boxer. I'm telling you, look at g5. Absolutely no doubts in his mind. He doesn't even make a preparatory move. There's no king b1. There's no let me get all of this settled. Knight d7. And now Tal plays a move that I don't get. A move that Stockfish doesn't even fully understand. Stockfish wants to play h5 and make preparatory moves. This man Tal says, you know what? What am I waiting for? g6. Completely giving the pawn up to two different pawns they can capture. Black will probably take this way to keep everything intact, because if black goes this way, this is weak. This is open. But g6 is a mesmerizing sacrifice, because now it's like, wait a minute, that's not the move that white wanted to play. He has no business playing that move. Tal had no business playing any damn move. He had no business playing any damn move. The Soviet school of chess thought that he was a scam artist. That his chess was not worthy. And look at this. And look at this. Now he created a hook. He created a pawn in front of his opponent's king. And look at Stockfish suddenly appreciating his sacrifice. Gh5, rook h5. Doesn't matter. All he gets is long-term attacking prospects. The knight has to go back to f6 now. The rook goes back to h1. Queen is coming. That's mate. How do you defend it with black? Black does what you're supposed to do. Strikes back in the center of the board, simultaneously preventing queen h2 and ready to open up this. You know what Tal played in this position? This next move that he played is so disrespectful. It is so ridiculous. The computer here gives bishop f4, clearing this maneuver, and then bringing the pawns forward. You know what Tal played in this position against d5? He played the move e5. His moves are so god level, Stockfish needs time to calculate them. You'll notice that against d5, Stockfish very quickly spits out bishop f4 plus 1.8. But e5, if you take with the queen, is completely lost because the queen is trapped. And Tal knew that by deflecting his opponent's knight away from his king and blocking this diagonal, he would seize the diagonal. He would get this attack roaring forward, and the defense would be borderline untenable. The computer at this point wants to run the king to the center of the board. Knight takes e5. Of course, now modern day, we have 2700 engine. It says just go queen h2. Just go queen h2, Mikhail. Just play it. Because then, obviously, you have queen h8 mate. And if the king runs, you go here, etc. But Tal was Stockfish back in the day. Knight takes e5. He does all of this. Stockfish at this point claiming that the king run is good. Look at him go. Now Tal plays rook h7. Stockpiling the pressure. Now, Stockfish begins reconsidering again. It has no idea what is going on. So, Koblenz plays f5. Bishop h6. Look at this armada arriving on the h-file. And suddenly Stockfish is like, uh-oh, this is really, really good. You can't take because of this. So we play rook d7, adding more defense. And now, a shot to the other side of the board. Bishop takes b5. The bishop comes alive on the 25th move of the game. It's been dormant. It is one of the only pieces of the white position that has not moved. And it snipes down a pawn that was going to be used to attack the white king. You cannot take. You cannot take. Because then you would be inviting trouble. And also rook g1. This is the idea. To put 22 points of pressure on the g7 square, which becomes untenable. Black plays rook f7. Rook g1. The bishop snipes the king. From all angles, the Koblenz's position is disintegrating. This is absolutely... I've never seen anything like this. And now here comes his knight. Tal is literally going to get every single piece that he has into the attack. Knight g4 is the best move, by the way. Defending himself by sacrificing. But black's position is impossible to defend in the long run. Tal doesn't take any step back. This is under attack. This is under pressure. This is ready to open at a moment's notice. The knight is just ready. This knight is the last piece that has yet to get into the game. It perishes. Tal doesn't even need it. He plays bishop back to e3, stepping back, hitting the rook. Here the computer finds like perfect defense. The evaluation bar is like the cold shower of Tal's games because, you know, you're supposed to go here. And that's the way that this 3650 preserves its power. It's almost better to analyze Tal games without that because no human at that time could find variations like pawn to d4, sending the bishop back. And who knows, Tal would have probably found rook gh1, giving up his bishop for queen g8, king g8, rook h8 mate. So sometimes it's not even worth it because the computer doesn't even fully appreciate some of his moves. He is literally finding moves where the computer has to reconsider. So he played bishop back to e3, creating the threat of bishop c5 on the attack on the king. The rook, he left the bishop hanging. He left that bishop hanging. He doesn't take the rook. d4, rook h1, rook to d7. And now, apparently, g takes f5 is also winning. He goes right back, stops the king's escape. And as always, the computer is just like trying to be a buzzkill here. Black takes on b5, rook h6. Tal is down 4 points of material. The knight is swarming the king. The bishop is swarming the king. White's king, by the way, has no defenders left. Just pawns. Just a matter of time. But you cannot stop the attack. You can take the knight. White has rook f6. And then there's a forced draw here. gf6, bishop h6, rook g7, bishop g7, king e7, bishop f6, king d6, bishop e5, king d5, rook a7. And apparently this is a draw. The black king marches into the center of the board. No human on the planet would have done that against Tal in the mid-20th century. And instead, the white king slides to stop the pawn and the game is over. The game is over. Queen c6, rook f6 check. The attack swarms in. You can't take the queen. And black resigns because you're going to get here. Queen is just too slow to get to the king. What a game. What a game. What a swarm. Look at this attack. Absolutely incredible. Bishop h6, rook g1. Every single piece utilized. Every single piece utilized. Melting the souls of his opponents is Mikhail Tal. Just the otherworldly level of the game and a level of understanding. I got two more for you. I got the iconic game that Tal played in the 1960 World Chess Championship match against Binck when he won the World Championship at 23 years old. He beat an incumbent champion who changed chess forever. The Binck School of Chess produced some of the greatest prodigies known to humans. Some of the greatest players known to humans in 20th and now 21st century chess. And he beat him. He beat him in 1960, and it was a sensation. And the way that he beat Binck, who was a technician, he was a surgeon chess player, he was incredible, he played these positional games, is he took him to a deep, dark forest of the King's Indian defense. He closed the center. He created some stability, but then he would just attack. He would attack and it would be magical. He could attack with white and he could attack with black. He would use his pawns. He would use his pieces. Rook c8, knight to h5, queen on b4. Hitting from all three sides, but yet the white position stable as a rock because that's the type of player that Binck was. But Tal would play moves like rook c4. He would bring his rooks and he would attack on all three sides of the board. Like I said, traditional evaluation of Stockfish allows Stockfish to retain some sort of advantage by poking holes in the mystique of the game. And this is very comforting, but what if I turn this off? What if you don't have an evaluation bar? And you have to sit here and face the wrath of Tal. Let's flip it back to White's perspective to feel like what it feels to be Tal's opponents. To face the wrath, to face the complications. Black is coming to attack you over here, so you capture. Because you know black cannot capture with the pawn, because you will take his knight. So bishop takes. Well, that's easy. Now black doesn't have any imposing pawns. He can't even make any forward progress. Well, our rook is hanging, so we go here. And our plan is to go g4, a3, kick out the queen, etc., etc. And then Mikhail Tal, 23 years of age, in the year 1960, arrives on the king's side with his knight. allowing a full piece capture, a full capture of a knight to the incumbent best player in the world, Mikhail Botvinnik, in 1960. Gives up the knight, not for 2, but for 1 pawn. 1 pawn. Now, white here can strike back. He backs up the bishop, and he allows queen takes b2. He says, you know what, you can have a second pawn, but then we're going to begin trading pieces. Tal says, okay. You see, that was the kind of player that Tal was. He was like, all right, you want to give me a second pawn? Okay, there's only one way out of this deep dark forest. We pressure this, this and this. It's chaos. The best move now for Botvinnik is to play rook to b1, which he does, giving up his rook. The point is that the queen gets stuck. The queen is going to get stuck. It's a very, very dangerous position for black. Rook b1. But here, Tal says, you know what? I took 2 pawns. Now it's time to attack the integrity. It's time to attack the nucleus, the epicenter of the white position. All his pieces tied together. f3. The shot from the side. You can't take with the queen, because the queen takes the bishop and the white position falls apart. But I got news for you. Taking like this is also very dangerous because you open up a direct line of attack on your king. That also feels very uncomfortable. For example, takes, here you try to go for bishop to e4. Well, now I'm going to sacrifice. Because all of this is open. That wasn't open before. Knight e4, queen b1. What's going to happen here? Apparently after all of this, queen e6, etc. White has good chances. But that's the thing. Tal set these situational problems for his opponents. They had to outcalculate him for 10 moves. And they couldn't. They couldn't outcalculate him. Rook takes b2. He grabs the queen of Botvinnik. Botvinnik plays rook b3. Now the rooks are dancing. Botvinnik, by the way, let it be known, is a full piece up. White is up a full knight. But the attack is swirling. The pawn is a square away from queening. And then, in this position, rook takes c3 was actually lethal. Trying to get the rook to d1. But Tal found the second best way according to the machine, which is bishop to f4. And when it's all said and done, he plays this endgame. Like I said, deep dark forest. But when the path out is only wide enough for one, it doesn't matter how he wins. He could checkmate you, or, like he did in the last game, or he can get you into an endgame where you're suffocating. He is also extremely high level in the last stage of the game. He doesn't always need tactics and sacrifices. He completely paralyzes the white position, something that Botvinnik used to do to all of his opponents. Dances back, grabs a pawn, grabs another pawn, and Botvinnik was frozen on the back rank. 2 pawns down, bishop c4. Even if he gets one of them back, this defense is untenable. He gives a couple of checks. The king runs out, rook a3, and just d5. Bishop h4, swarming. It's 1 pawn, but my lord, is it a quality pawn? And for a second time in a row in this video, Tal gets it done in the last stage of the game. There's just no stopping this pawn. c3, the king comes forward. Botvinnik plays this and resigns because the king is going to dance down to c1. The pawn will go to c2. And you will move the king, and you will promote. And that's the way it feels to deal with Tal. You don't know which side of the board he's going to get you. It's like a mixed martial arts. He might kick you, he might wrestle you, he might punch you. I mean, it's like any sport. He's lethal. He could shoot the 3, he could shoot the 2. He could, he's one of the most versatile players of all time, and he can get it done in every single phase. And like I said, Tal led a crazy lifestyle. That's what the legend says. He led a crazy lifestyle. He smoked and drank the board. He had a record in the 1959 Candidates Tournament against Bobby Fischer of 4-0. He laughed at a move that Bobby played at the chessboard. That's the kind of man that he was. But that type of lifestyle will catch up to you. And Tal was sick. He was sick in the 80s and the 90s. Probably even, who knows, back in that day, probably sick earlier as well. But he came out of the hospital, the legend goes, in 1992 to play a blitz tournament. A blitz tournament in which Garry Kasparov was participating. In 1992, Kasparov had defended his world championship 4 times at that point, and he had played 5 world championship matches against Karpov. Kasparov was the best player in the world since becoming world champion. He was the best player in the world for 20 years, probably. Tal came out of retirement, and this was a blitz tournament. Tal came out of the hospital, not retirement, to play this game. It was e4, and it was bishop b5 check. It was this type of Sicilian defense, knight d7. Very confrontational, very weird. Pawn's not getting taken. This was a blitz game, remember. Knight takes, e6. Kasparov played like this, and even at the age of even in 1992, at the age of 56, Tal didn't need second invitation. Queen on c7, rook to e1, all his pieces ready to go. One of these bad boys is going to open up that center. Kasparov took a lot of time in the opening, and he tried to push back Tal's pieces. He was kind of ready. He was ready for one of these pieces to rip it open. He's playing all the best moves. He's looking to pressure here. Now Tal plays f4. f4. And the thing is, if you play knight g6 or even knight c4, this is lethal. This is a very common Sicilian sacrifice that opens the center, and black can't cover himself. King d7 is queen g4 mate. Can you imagine Kasparov losing a game like this? No, of course not. Kasparov was one of the best calculators in the world. And he found h6. He found a very nice idea here. With all of this under pressure, the only move here is g5, counter-attacking white. Again, the point is, if you play knight g6, well, easy. I go here, and then I continue my attack. Your knight is actually a target, which is all Tal needed. So Kasparov had to strike back. We've got two of the best calculating players of all time. Tal in this position took the knight. G takes h4. All this pandemonium. Is he going to open up the center? What is he going to do? He is. He is going to open up the center with e takes d6. Bishop takes d6. Knight to d5. Wow. Tal roars in, sacrificing a knight. Again, easy with this here. How do you defend yourself? E takes d5, e takes d5 with the attack here. And now black plays king f8, and Tal plays queen f3. And the threat is knight to e6. The threat is rook f1, doubling up, tripling up, maybe rook to e6 in some lines as well. Then bring this rook over here. Black can grab a pawn and try to get out with like bishop to g3, but that's very, very dangerous stuff you're playing with. Now, the fascinating thing about this game is that this is where it ends. If you look at any database, this is where the game ends. How's that possible? Well, apparently, Kasparov lost on time. Apparently, so much energy and initiative was being put here on Kasparov that he spent a lot of time in this game finding moves like h6 and bishop and g5. That's just how the story goes. Another legend of this game goes, this game was actually much longer than 17 moves. We just don't have the 17 moves. But one thing that is true from this game is I believe Kasparov himself in an interview said this was the only game that he lost in this tournament. In 1992, of course, he was the best player in the world at the time. Multiple-time world champion already. So Kasparov won a tournament in 1992, and the only player who he lost to was Mikhail Tal a month before he died. Think about that. That is incredible stuff. This is really, truly the stuff of legends. Mikhail Tal is, without question, one of, if not the most interesting chess player who has ever lived. He is a creative genius. He would attack on a level like nobody else. He wouldn't even need to calculate certain variations. The level of panic he instilled into his opponents was unbelievable. Another one of his famous quotes was that he elevated his level in chess when he realized that he wasn't the only one nervous at the board. So were his opponents. His opponents were just as uncertain about their moves as he was, and that played into his hands, that played to his benefit. I wanted to dedicate a video to him. His games are unbelievable. I mean, I could cover 20 games in a video, his history. Maybe I will do that. If you have a favorite game of Tal you want me to cover in the future, or certain tournaments, do let me know in the comments. And I'll see you in the next video. Get out of here.